Welcome, everyone, to the 2020 MLS SuperDraft presented by Adidas. This is the draft ahead of the 25th season of MLS, with 26 teams now planning for the new campaign. That includes Nashville. You see some of their fans. And part of that is always this draft, which is being conducted in a new and fresh way this year. We have cameras with many of the top collegiate prospects, and also cameras with many of the teams are waiting to make their picks, including Inter Miami, who are in the center of that wall of screens we have as we bring you inside our Bristol draft room. And welcome to the show. I'm Adrian Healy, in the company of the man who was drafted number 2 back in 2000.
Should have been one.
Should have been one, of course.
Whatever, let it go.
Taylor Twellman is here. Also from MLSsoccer.com, delighted to have Matt Doyle on board. You might know him as the armchair analyst. Matt, welcome.
Good to be here, gentlemen.
Your
nice
prodigious,
you shave your head, bud.
Prodigious output on MLS Soccer. I'm sure most of you have read some of his work. Let's get a big picture thought first, Matt. I'll start with you. You still get excited by this draft?
I do. And part of it is that it's changed, right? You don't find players like Taylor anymore, and not that often, who can come directly from college or the lower levels and step right into an MLS team. Instead, you have to be smart. You have to draft a kid and say, I have a plan to develop you into a starter in the next year or two. And we've seen that with Miles Robinson. We saw it with Jackson Yule. We saw it with that great 2017 Super Draft class. And we're going to see more and more. It's almost like baseball more than NFL or NBA draft, where it's like you plug and you play.
Yeah, I mean, there's different forms. Obviously, this is the first MLS Super Draft where all three of us actually got sleep last night. We weren't in the hotel bar last night trying to figure out what's going to go on.
Different.
But in all seriousness, I do understand the other narrative. You can't find foundational pieces in this Super Draft. So what I mean is, it's not necessarily a Super Draft. However, you're ignorant if you think you can't complete a roster. Look at what Minnesota United did last year with Gasper and Dotson.
They don't make the playoffs.
Exactly, Matt. And that's the thing. You can fill your gaps. You can find a Julian Gressel like that. But to find someone that you're going to base your team around, it's growth of the league. You're not going to find that in the 25th season, but you are going to complete your roster. And ultimately, this is about the first moments in franchise history for Miami and Nashville.
Like a draft in any sport, there are rules, and those rules have been tweaked just a little bit for season number 25. 4 rounds. We're going to be concentrating on just the first round today, but the draft will extend through to Monday with rounds 3 and 4. Each team, and this has been reduced, now has just 3 minutes to make each pick, and each team is permitted 1 timeout of 3 minutes for trades and such. This is the order, the top 10 in terms of teams picking, and the new arrivals to the league have the top 2 picks, as is customary. Inter Miami will pick 1, Nashville will pick 2. Miami also have the 3rd pick that they've obtained in a trade from FC Cincinnati a little earlier in the preseason. Matt, Inter Miami on the clock. Diego Alonso, relatively recently established as head coach. What direction do you think he and Paul McDonough are going to go?
Well, he's always been a pragmatist, Diego Alonso, in terms of how he manages his team. But as I see it in this draft, there are 3 guys in play for number 1. A couple of forwards, Daryl Dike, the big guy from University of Virginia, and Robbie Robinson, the Herman Trophy winner, scores goals for fun from Clemson. And then Jack Maher, the center back from Indiana, maybe the most pro-ready guy in this draft. Like, that's it for the number 1 pick. It's going to be one of those 3 guys. I'd go with DK. I know others disagree.
Yeah, I think Robinson's going to go. But more so, I think the biggest talking point, Matt and Adrian, on Inter Miami is Paul McDonough sitting at that table. Because he's got experience in this moment. Remember with Orlando City, he took Kyle Larin. Remember with Atlanta United, he took Miles Robinson, which all of us agreed at that time that was the number 1 pick over Abu Danladi. But also he got Julian Gressel, so he understands what you can get out of the college game. I just think we need to temper the expectation of this number 1 pick, because whether it's Robinson, DK, or Maher, the way Paul McDonough and Alonso want to build this team, this isn't going to be a bona fide starter. This is going to be a depth piece that's going to complete the roster. But I'll be shocked if he doesn't go to Robinson from Clemson.
Well, this has been an extraordinary long runway to this moment for Inter Miami. Remember, David Beckham, the owner, was a player, and how he changed the league when he arrived in January of 2007. Of course, he has had the contract option written in. Ability to purchase the team for $25 million,
kind of like yours.
Did. Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah. Announced on February the 5th, 2014, that Miami would be the place. Officially awarded the franchise 4 years later, and now getting set to play their first season at Lockhart Stadium, which is just up the road in
That looks a lot different than the Lockhart Stadium I know.
Just quickly, general thoughts, because of course the bar has been set very high by recent expansion teams, Atlanta and LAFC. What do you make of what Miami have done so far?
Yeah, but I remind everyone, 2017, nobody expected Atlanta United to be the juggernaut that they are. So I still look at what Paul McDonough, Alonso, and Inter Miami have done. It's incomplete. A lot like that timeline you just saw. Yeah. There's been forks in the road in trying to get there. However, if they make the next 4 or 5 signings that they plan on making, when you look at a Martinez up front and you go out and complete this roster, then I do really like this roster because the moves Paul McDonough has made, Matt, he's completed the roster, he's built a foundation there, but they've got to get the sexiness, the high-quality pieces up front. I think they're going to do that. Then I think we're going to be talking about Miami having a say in the Eastern Conference.
Has it been what you expected, Matt?
It's been a little bit slower played than I expected, but I'm okay with that because if you look at it, they have a foundation. They have a lot of MLS players, guys who have done it in this league all over. I mean, Luis Robles in goal, Victor Ulloa in central midfield, Lee Wynn. These are guys who have won. Roman Torres, another one. They've also went out and spent a little bit on a pair of 19-year-old Argentines, Julian Carranza, the number 9, who I think is probably going to be the starter this year, and then the DP left winger, Matias Pellegrini. He cost $9 million. They dropped $15 million on those two guys, and we all know there's more to come, but I think it's going to be in that vein. I think they're going to build like Atlanta did and not necessarily go out and get a 30-something.
But everyone's saying they're not doing what Atlanta did. Miguel Almiron wasn't a star right from the beginning.
That's true. Also joining us on this broadcast from MLSsoccer.com, Andrew Wiebe, who is standing by in Miami with one of the architects, Paul McDonough.
All right, thank you, Adrian. Now, Paul, before we get to the number 1 overall pick in the 2020 MLS SuperDraft presented by Adidas, you've drafted for talent before, and you've done it with expansion teams, Orlando, Kyle Larin, Atlanta, Miles Robinson, Julian Gressel. When you look at these players available, do you see guys that could make an impact on this first team in that first season?
Yeah, we've spent a lot of time scouting the last few months, and we do feel as though there are guys that can help teams in the league right away.
All right, you have 2 of the first 3 picks and the number 1 pick as well. You're on the clock. Give us the name. Who is the number 1 overall pick in this 2020 MLS SuperDraft?
We are going to select Robbie Robinson from Clemson University.
Back to you, Adrian.
So Robbie Robinson, it is. You can hear some of the reactions. We do have cameras embedded in all the top prospects' home territories. There is a live look at Clemson as Robbie Robinson, the Herman Trophy winner, the top collegiate prospect in the country, is now knowing that he's going to begin his professional career in Miami with Inter Miami. What do we make of Robbie Robinson? Obviously a prodigious goal scorer at college level, Matt. Can he do it at the pro level?
He looks like he can do it. You're going to see it in this package right here. He scores goals every which way. Right foot, left foot, head, getting inside the defender and, one-touch finish inside the 6, getting out on the break. He'll dribble guys. He wants to make guys look bad. You hope there's some Kyle Larin in him. Yep. You wonder if there's a little Chris Carriere as well, because he's got some attitude.
Well, that's only if he shows up at his opening training with jean shorts on, Chris Carriere. I think I look at Robbie Robinson, and I look at it this way. Again, going back to building this roster, if Inter Miami does it the exact way they want to, they're not relying on Robbie Robinson day 1 to come in here and be their number 9. But injuries can happen. He can fill in the gaps. I think Paul McDonough looks at Robbie Robinson as a depth piece, someone that makes the game day 18. And especially in 2020, when you look at Major League Soccer, guys, the attacking players, how many of those are American?
Right.
More so, how many of those are coming out of college and succeeding? All the money influx is going to the attacking players. I like this pick because Paul McDonough's number 1 goal for Inter Miami, and this may surprise people, is to win the Open Cup in 2020. And the biggest reason why, that gets him into CONCACAF Champions League immediately. They've got a manager that knows how to win that. I think that's part of what the Robbie Robinson, Roman Torres, Juan Agudelo project is. But good for Robbie Robinson. What a moment.
Matt, it has become increasingly harder, has it not, for forwards to make an immediate impact out of the drafts? We've seen defenders do it. We haven't seen so many forwards do it.
Yeah, you get a fleeting chance to take your opportunity, but we've seen it. Mason Toye last year for Minnesota United. Brian White when Bradley Wright Phillips went down. A couple of years before that, Jeremy Abobasi, he's played well for Portland. We talked about how, we think Carranza's going to start, and Paul McDonough probably thinks Carranza is going to start. Robbie Robinson thinks Robbie Robinson's going to start, and that's why he's the number 1.
Well, a little surprise awaiting Robbie Robinson. There he is in the Clemson draft room, and look who's on a Skype call with him.
Very well, and you?
Good, good.
Firstly, I want to say welcome to Miami.
Thank you, thank you.
It's a very exciting year for us.
It's a
very exciting year for us. The success that you had with it was a joy to watch. We're excited for you to bring your skills to our city, and it's an exciting time for us. We're excited about you being able to contribute to the team and develop as a player, and we're excited to have you in our club.
Thank you, thank you. I'm really excited and can't wait to get started with you guys.
Good. Well, we're excited to have you, and say congratulations to your family, because we are a family in Miami, and we're excited to have you with us.
Thank you, thank you.
Congratulations.
Brilliant stuff. Miami owner David Beckham talking to the number 1 pick, Robbie Robinson. Let's quickly shift to the number 2, the other new arrival in Nashville. What are you expecting, Matt?
Yep, they've been a little bit quieter in their build, and they've really filled out their roster. They could throw out a very credible roster. They have a lot of center forwards. I said I would take Daryl Dike number 1. I don't think they're going to take Daryl Dike. I think they're going to go with Jack Maher. Maybe he'll pair with Miguel Nazarit, the young Colombian center back they have. They have a bunch others as well. Depth everywhere gives them the luxury of going with the guy who they think is going to be the best player.
It has been quieter, hasn't it, compared to
Absolutely, absolutely. But they've got also some bigger question marks about stadium, training facility, and other stuff outside the infrastructure. This is a great moment for Nashville and their ownership group, but also for Jack Maher. He's a St. Louis kid.
Yeah.
And most importantly, I think he's the most ready. I'd be shocked if Nashville doesn't go with Jack Maher.
Yeah. What have you made of what they've done in the coaching department? Because there's been a lot of Colorado Rapids.
I mean, Gary Smith knows what he's doing. He's won an MLS Cup. Stability is the name of the game.
Right. Also joining us from MLSsoccer.com, Susanna Collins, who is standing by with the general manager of Nashville, Mike Jacobs. Susanna.
Thank you so much, Adrian. All right, well, Mike, if the expansion draft taught us anything, it's that Nashville knows how to throw a party, and right now we are bringing that party to your pick. Tell us about what's going on today.
Look, there's been a love affair between this city and our club, and, you know, for our newest player to welcome him with some Southern hospitality and some of his newest, closest friends, it's an exciting opportunity for him and his family.
Well, we have a bus full of Nashville SC supporters ready to give this guy the surprise of his life. Let's go meet him. All right, here we go.
We love you, Nashville. We do. We love you, Nashville. We do. Oh, Nashville, we love you.
All right. This is exciting. Feels like our Publishers Clearinghouse moment, right?
Absolutely.
And he has no idea that we're showing up, correct?
That's what I think.
All right. All right, Mike. We're at his house right now. Tell us, who are you selecting in the 2020 SuperDraft?
With number 2 pick, Nashville selects Jack Maher from Indiana University.
Let's bring him out. This is quite a welcome for your pick. Where's Jack?
Front lawn.
I mean, it's a dream come true. I mean, to come to a team in a city like Nashville, I mean, the sky's the limit for this, and the whole environment that's here, surrounded by my family and friends, I think that this is really special, and I'm so glad that Nashville picked me.
And a little birdie told me that Nashville was the team that you wanted to go to. What does it mean that they selected you as their first pick?
Yeah, it means the world. I mean, Mike Jacobs is here, and he's an incredible guy, and it's that sort of family that they've built around it, the ties with St. Louis, and I think that this is just a stepping stone for the team as a whole.
Well, Jack, congratulations. Enjoy this moment. Adrian, we'll send it back to you.
Thank you so much.
Great stuff, Susanna. They're making it happen in the Music City. Jack Maher will be joining them. What sort of centre-back are they getting, Doyle?
A calm, composed, and commanding one. He reads the game well. You see he has good size. But what everybody talked about with Jack Maher is his maturity and his leadership and organizational ability from the back. He's constantly communicating, likes to keep his lines tight, and that's what they teach in Indiana. They put a ton of pros into the game because of stuff like that.
Yeah, they also teach that in St. Louis. Don't forget that, pal. But what I love about Jack Maher, and for those of you watching this now that haven't seen it, an unbelievable feature on his family on MLSsoccer.com and on their Twitter feed about just some of the obstacles his family overcame. His older brother couldn't play contact sports due to a medical condition. He used that as motivation. Jack even himself had some turmoil a little bit in his career. He's very mature for his age. He's got to get better with his feet because we all know center backs at this stage, they need to be able to pass between the lines and read the game. But this is the kind of mature kid that I think Nashville needs in their inaugural season because they're going to count on him because they still don't know their center back position very well in their tandem. So I like the pick in a good moment for the St. Louis kid. Well done, Jack.
Once upon a time coached by the legendary Preki as well. We should say that about...
well, if he's got the half a cut that Preki has, then he should be playing center forward.
Miami are back on the clock. Remember, they had pick number 1 and 3. They obtained pick number 3 in an earlier trade with FC Cincinnati. What direction do you think they go in now, having got Robinson?
Well, I mean, best player on the board is DK, but in terms of need, it's Dylan Nealis.
You're going to ride that DK horse all afternoon, aren't you?
Absolutely. He's an overlapping right back. He has great bloodlines. Both his brothers have played in MLS. His older brother, Sean, is with the Red Bulls right now. I think it's a good value pick because if you can plug and play him for 1,500 minutes, you save money against the cap and you get stability.
And that's exactly what it's about with a franchise that wants to spend money and plug holes. Nealis is going to be the guy. Now, the questions are at the next level, can he defend and whatnot? But you love his mentality. I love the fact that he is a younger brother. There's a chip on his shoulder. McDonough and Inter Miami will take Nealis, and I think he may have a huge say in the starting 11 because that's one of the few pieces that I think McDonough and Alonso still haven't come to grips with how to do that.
Well, back down we go to Miami, and Paul McDonough standing by once again with Andrew Wiebe.
All right, thanks, Adrian. Now, Twellman, Doyle, they say you're taking Dylan Nealis. You're on the clock right now, Paul. The number 3 overall pick in the 2020 MLS SuperDraft will be...
Can't argue with them. We're going to go with Dylan Nealis.
Dylan Nealis. Back to you guys.
First time ever. Paul McDonough agreed with Matt Doyle.
Nealis.
Yeah.
No great surprise, obviously, although the DK train is still rolling.
The DK train is, in fact, still rolling. You can see him here with his family.
Look at Grandma. Grandma's living the dream.
Grandma and all the aunties are having a good time. They've done this before. And I think that's part of the appeal here is like you want to have, you're not looking for a guy who's going to be an MLS All-Star 10 times. You're looking for a guy who's going to stay in the league for 10 years, is going to soak up minutes, going to make you better on the attack, and hopefully, as you said, Taylor, can he defend 1v1? If he can do that, then he's going to make this team better.
Yeah, and I think when you look at Nealis and how he played at Georgetown, I still am going to compare him to a fellow Georgetown Rosenberry. And I actually think Nealis has a bigger upside and may be a better player than Rosenberry was coming into Major League Soccer. But again, this is all about Miami and what they do at the top of that roster. If they do what they want to do at the top of the roster, now you're looking at these solid picks for me. They help you on the USL level. They help you in the Open Cup, which that competition they want to desperately win. I like these picks, and I think McDonough knows what he's getting out of college. His track record speaks much larger than anything I'm going to say about Paul McDonough, and I just like the way he went about this, and I know Matt disagrees with DK and Robinson. I think it's 6.5 one way, half a dozen the other. I do like the 2 picks here.
Continues a string of products that Georgetown have produced that have made the grade in MLS. Vancouver are now on the clock with the 4th pick. Remember, they finished bottom in the Western Conference. They are one of the teams that have had big off-season signings outside of this draft, of course. If you look at some of the key protagonists that have been picked up, Adam Buxa for $4.5 million for the Revolution.
Adrian, I think what's interesting when you watch this timeline is who are the franchises buying these players?
Yeah.
Who are the franchises spending money? Yeah. That's the biggest talking point of all of this. And I take Portland out of that because Maher Paulson and that group have always spent a good amount of money. But these are franchises that many people have questioned whether or not their ownership group is going to join the 25th Major League Soccer season. And that's the real talking point there. Is Vancouver's part of that, and I still think they need much more than Cavallini up front. But that is a huge talking point for me with the CBA discussion going on currently. What are these new owners, not new owners, but the new wave of spending money, what it's going to mean? If these clubs are spending money, well done, because Major League Soccer is going to be better for it.
The pick is in, and it's Ryan Raposo of Syracuse University, a sophomore generation Adidas signing. He plays as a winger. Also spent some time playing in Germany as a teenager. Chose Syracuse because of the school's recent success in having players signed to Generation Adidas contracts by MLS. Of course, Miles Robinson, a big example of that in recent years. You can see the celebrations as Raposo gets word that he is heading to Vancouver. And of course, he is Canadian, which helps as well.
Yeah, so it's a little bit like home, but he's actually from Toronto. He grew up just outside Toronto in Hamilton. As he said, he played for a program that's put a lot of guys into MLS, and what you're seeing right here is why he's in MLS. He's quick, he's skillful on the ball, and he's a lethal finisher when he gets into space. And he's a winger. As you said, Taylor, Cavallini's going to need some help. They don't have a lot of real wingers on the team, so like Dylan Nealis, I think he's going to get a chance to go out there and win a job. If he could set Cavallini up, and if he could finish plays off in the preseason, he's going to play real minutes.
Yeah, I look at Mark Dos Santos as the head coach of Vancouver, right? And I've been intrigued by him ever since the USL days. Then he went and worked with Bob Bradley. I just hope that Vancouver gives him some toys to work with, right? I hope it's not Cavallini, now you got to make with everything we've got, right? And that's ultimately what my big picture talking point with Vancouver is that if you do have the capability to spend money and give Mark Dos Santos some tools, then they're intriguing to me. But how many game winners, match winners, whatever phrase you want to use, do they have?
Yeah.
And the answer is very few, if any, right? So Cavallini needs support. He's got to have support in and around him, but they need more than just the 4th overall draft pick in Major League Soccer. It's going to be interesting to see what toys Dos Santos gets, because I think the jury's still out there with Vancouver and how they're going to spend money.
Can tell you that Orlando City have taken the first time out of this Super Draft, so they want to talk things over for 3 minutes. We'll talk a little more Vancouver. Who are they, Matt? Because this is their 10th season in the league, and there's still, to me at least, a bit of an air of mystery about who they are and what their DNA is.
Well, it's their second straight rebuilding season because they tried to do it last year after selling Alphonso Davies and changing coaches. It didn't work for them. They weren't good in any phase of the game. This year, it looks to me like they're going to try to build a counterattacking team. That's what they have to do. Cavallini can play like that. Then find guys who can run with him. Just attack with 3. Play like it. Liga MX team. We saw
this is more exciting though for me to get to Orlando City is Oscar Pereira, right? And you look at this fan base and what the franchise has just failed at doing. And it's interesting because Pereira turned around Colorado, turned around Dallas, and he ultimately, I believe, is going to turn around Orlando. But they have aspirations of being a little bit bigger than what FC Dallas and Colorado Rapids are. I'm not sure that's going to happen in 2020, but I do love Pereira coming in here. And he's always, with this pick, pulled a rabbit out of his hat. I remember you and I, and actually, Adrian, you were there too, as well. Akindele, we all looked around looking at his sheets going, who? What school did he come from? So it's going to be interesting to see what pick comes in here. But the one talking point I have for Oscar in Orlando City is this. Oscar's never had to deal with some big-name players. Never in his entire career. Can he evolve in that? Because Nani's not going to be a problem. And then ultimately, what are you doing with Dom Dwyer? What are you going to use from Dom Dwyer? I think Oscar may try to keep him and try to maximize and see if he can get 15, 16 goals out of them. But I'm intrigued by Orlando City for the first time in a long time because Pereira's success track record says, you know what, he can turn things around very quickly.
Kyle Larin, 2015, Chris Mueller, just a couple of years ago. They've had success in the draft. What are they going to do?
They have had some very successful. I mean, I think Daryl DK is the obvious one right here.
Weird.
Who knows?
We will see if you are correct. The pick is indeed in for Orlando City.
1 minute remaining.
Jamie Watson is standing by in Orlando. Jamie.
Thanks, Adrian. Oscar, you've been on the job for a little over a month now. You've made a few additions, and today you get to make another addition to the Orlando City roster. With the 5th pick in the 2020 MLS SuperDraft, who is Orlando City selecting?
Daryl DK from the University of Virginia.
A big, strong, powerful center forward. What stood out to you in his collegiate career that you think could translate at the professional level?
Well, I would think that is a top striker in the country. We can bring some versatility and some options there. It's difficult to find forwards with that power, and we're excited.
A goal scorer that hopefully can be a strong addition this year to the season. For Orlando City, and you in particular, what changes are you prioritizing to get this organization, this fan base, into the coveted MLS playoffs that they've so long desired for the first time in club history?
Well, we would like to keep building because this franchise has done a job already on the 5-6 years that it has, and then just keep that process going and unify the structure with the academy, with the OCB2, with the second team, and just trying to put everybody in the same idea.
It's methodical, it's progressive, and hopefully it leads Orlando City to the playoffs for the first time. Good luck the rest of the day, Oscar. Adrian, back to you.
Thanks ever so much, Jamie. Remember, former Orlando City player Jamie Watson there with Oscar Pereira. What do you make of the pick? They were listening to you, Matt. Finally,
they were.
DK taken.
Yeah, I mean, the obvious comparison they're going to make is to Kyle Larin, but he's actually a much different player. All Kyle Larin did was score goals. DK's a much more well-rounded player. He holds the ball up. He's really good with his back to goal. He is a much better passer than people realize, and it's not just vision. It's cleverness around the box, and it's patience to let runs unfold. The weakest thing about his game, Taylor, is his goal scoring. He's not. His runs in the final third aren't goal hungry enough. He has to work on that.
And that's my biggest concern with Daryl DK. Now, I know Virginia's coaching staff will tell me otherwise. You look at the numbers, 10 goals, 8 assists last season, and he created some penalties. So if he's taken the penalties, you could argue it's 14, 15 goals. But he's 6'2", 220 in a college game where the physical presence usually dominates. And so for me, I look at DK and I say, well, wait a minute here. That number should be around 14, 15 goals. If you throw in the penalty combination that I just did, okay. I think his mobility needs to improve. But it's an intriguing pick to me because Oscar enjoys working with young players. We saw that at Dallas. So I like this pick. Now, the biggest question that everyone's going to have on Twitter is, well, what does this mean for Dom Dwyer? That pick has nothing to do with Dom Dwyer, right? Because if anything, if Dom Dwyer's there, DK could maybe push him and see what comes out. I like the pick, but I still have questions about DK at the highest level. But my word, 6'2", 220, if he's fit and he works on his mobility, the guy's a handful and he can be really an early presence for Orlando City this year.
And it runs in the family too. Younger brother of Bright DK taken in the first round by Portland almost a decade ago. Let's shift to pick number 6, and it's welcome back to Bruce Arena to the Super Draft. Of course, the New England Revolution appointing Bruce Arena about a third of the way through last season. I look back at his 2009 draft, Matt, with Omar Gonzalez and AJ De La Garza taken. Not that sort of talent available this time. Who do you think and where do you think they might go?
I mean, they've built out most of their roster, so they have the luxury to go with the best pick available, the best talent available, and they get the luxury to go with Generation Adidas. And at that point, it probably means Henry Kessler, who's Daryl DK's teammate from University of Virginia. And we know Bruce likes taking University of Virginia guys. I think this one's easy. You just write it down. It's plug and play.
Yeah, I think the most important thing about talking about the New England Revolution is that draft room. That's not in Bill Belichick's basement. That's not in Jonathan and Robert Kraft's house. That is in a $35 million training facility that all of a sudden the Krafts have said, we're going to spend money, we're going to spend real money. That's the biggest talking point. And oh, by the way, they'll probably take Kessler.
The pick is in, and you guys were both right. It is indeed Henry Kessler. Celebrations with him and his family. 6th overall, he'll be a member of the New England Revolution as he begins his pro career.
Wrong scarf.
The Virginia product. Actually played in the New York Red Bulls Academy as a teenager. He played in that academy alongside Tyler Adams and Mason Toy. He's a New Yorker through and through. He'll be a New Englander now.
Yeah, he's got to make the switch up to Boston. It's been done once or twice in the past. I mean, New England last year, even though they were much better once Bruce took over, they had trouble in that central defense. They had to move guys around. Kessler's huge. He's 6'4". He wins everything in the air. He can pass a little bit. So you can see him maybe earning some minutes this year, but he might be the test case for New England's new USL team. Well, I mean, send him down there, get him 1,500, 2,000 minutes, see what comes back in 2021.
Well, and obviously you saw what Kurt Arnolfo, Bruce Arena did with Dave Romney. Yeah. Right? And so you watch him a little bit, there's some similarities. The good news is that every Virginia Cavaliers basketball game, they're going to have about 17 alum in New England being able to watch those games, considering it's another UVA guy. I just look at the Revs in general speaking. When was the last time you went into a season saying, whoa, wait a minute, they're on point with the roster selection. Preseason's going to open up, and they've got almost their entire roster, $35 million training facility, designated player spending, and also a real buzz in downtown Boston about what the next move is. All this talk about the new stadium in Boston, real estate is real expensive. Newsflash, Captain Obvious. But the truth of the matter is you're not spending $35 million on this training facility if you're not real serious about what they're doing. And I applaud Robert Kraft and Jonathan for joining Major League Soccer in the 25th year and actually having a say, because with Bruce Arena and that staff, they're going to do something in the Eastern Conference. This is a smart pick. You knew he was going to go UVA, but it's more about the Revs in 2020 heading in the right direction for the first time in a long time.
Team that did make the playoffs last year. Remember the Revs losing to Atlanta in the first round of the playoffs. Team that didn't make the playoffs last year is up next at number 7, the Columbus Crew. Team that had the first ever pick when we're talking about MLS SuperDraft history. 1996, Brian McBride. A little look in at the Columbus draft room. Of course, Caleb Porter getting to conduct this draft.
You think Tim Bezbatchenko's doing karaoke right there?
He's up there with the mic. Tim Bezbatchenko, the GM. What do you make of the direction Columbus are heading, and where do you think they're going to go in this draft?
If you look at the last 2/3 of last season, well, the last half of last season, they were really, really good. They were tough to beat. They were solid. And then they went out and they made 2 big moves in getting Darlington Nagbe and Lucas Zelarayan. Yeah. So suddenly that central midfield is going to win you games. And you know they have guys on the wing. Now Jossie Zardes is a reliable striker at this point. They don't have any holes on this team. So again, they have the luxury of just going out there and going for the best player available. My guess is like Calum Jennings maybe from UCF, but I don't know. This is the first one where I don't have a gut feel.
I think the pick is in, isn't it?
The pick is indeed in. It is Miguel Berry from San Diego. He will be the number 7 pick in this MLS SuperDraft. He'll be a member of the Columbus Crew heading forward. And Caleb Porter.
I think, yes, and that's where I was going to interrupt you, is that Caleb Porter finally feels like he's gotten his hands on this team, right? When you take over a team and you take over a franchise that was successful the way Greg Berhalter was with limited resources, you got to give Caleb Porter and Bezbatchenko a little bit more time, and they've done that. I do like their acquisitions. I have a big question mark, though, because what do you do with Will Trapp and Artur? And at some point, one of those needs to move. I'd be shocked if it's not Will Trapp, because I do think Will Trapp wants to expand his career and maybe try something else and get out of Columbus where he's been there his entire time.
As well.
Exactly.
Yep.
He's got the passport. But I like what Caleb Porter is doing, and obviously what he's gotten out of Nagbe. I mean, Nagbe was very good in Atlanta, but he pushes the right buttons with Darlington Nagbe. I think this is going to be an interesting project in Columbus.
So if you're just joining us, a recap of what we've seen. Remember, 3 minutes per pick. It is whizzing by, literally. Robbie Robinson taken top of the pile by Miami. Jack Maher following for Nashville, Dylan Nealis. Into Miami's 2nd pick, Ryan Raposo at number 4. Pick number 8, another team that missed the playoffs, the Houston Dynamo. again, feels like a new era. We've said that for several seasons in a row.
Absolutely, but this one, it absolutely is a new era because they have Tab Ramos, and you know he's going to have a much different approach than Wilmer Cabrera. He's already talked a ton about building up that academy system, which is it's laying fallow for years and years. But Tab's not going to throw the kids out there just for the sake of throwing the kids out there. They have a pretty full and complete roster. The question I have is, Mauro Manotas.
Yes.
Is he gone?
I mean, he literally wins you games.
He does.
Right?
But this is the third straight window where we're like,
I mean,
when does it happen?
You know my feeling. The moment you get a legitimate offer, move them on. Because if I'm an owner of that franchise, now my franchise is now on the world market, and then all of a sudden in South America and Central America, that becomes a real player. When you see a player can use that as a stepping stone, get Manotas out of here. My question is, do you have a replacement?
Christian Ramirez is already there.
I agree.
Already there.
I agree.
I told you, no expense spared here. We have another reporter from MLSsoccer.com. Jillian Sakovits is joining us with Tab Ramos in Houston. Jillian.
Thanks, Adrian. Tab, your first pick as manager of this team at number 8. Who will it be?
We are selecting Garrett McLaughlin from Southern Methodist University, forward.
What was it about him?
There's a lot that we liked about him. Actually, very dynamic forward. We think that for us, he can play any of the 3 positions up top. He's a very good number 9, but he can play the 11 or the 7. He also presses well, so that's something that we really liked.
Let's talk big picture for a moment. You managing for a decade in the national team ranks, but now you make your return to Major League Soccer, but this time as a manager. What will the identity of this Houston Dynamo side be?
Well, sometimes it's easy to say, before you start with what it's going to look like. I like this team from the beginning. I think we have dynamic players. We have players who are very good on the ball, players who want the ball, and players who are willing to make plays. So I'm very excited to take over and looking forward to a great season.
Tab, thanks.
Thank you.
Adrian?
Great stuff, Jillian. Thank you so much. So Garrett McLaughlin, Tab Ramos, staying in the state of Texas for the pick, the forward from SMU. What do you know about him, Matt? What sort of player are they getting?
Prolific goal scorer. As Tab said, he was a number 9 in college, but he can play everywhere. Along that front line, and he profiles a little bit like Ethan Finley, who we know has had some very good years in MLS, and that he's not the most skillful guy, but he's got enough once you get him into the open field, and then once he is in the open field, pace and finishing ability.
Yeah, I was going to say maybe similar pace to Jordan Morris, right? Ethan Finley, same kind of thing, very direct, that kind of player. The bigger talking point is I want to see Tab Ramos succeed, but I also want to see him given, similar to Marc Dos Santos, a plethora of options to actually do this. And so I'm calling Houston Dynamo ownership right now. You've got it. You're at the precipice of really becoming a player. The stadium works there, the environment there. I remember the first 2 seasons playing in Houston, they were a disaster, 20,000 plus on top of you. They've got to make that stadium and that home field advantage come to them, but they've got to give Tab some resources to do it. The credit goes to Tab because he's willing to work with younger players. He may have to do that, but ultimately I think Houston's got something working there. Just give him a little bit more money and a little bit more resources to get it done, because that place could be a real nightmare to go try to get points at.
It's going to be really intriguing to follow the progress of Tab Ramos as he switches to the pro ranks. Montreal are up next, guys, at number 10. They have taken a timeout, so they are going to take a little bit of extra time to think about it. And, of course, this is a team that missed the playoffs for 3 years in a row, but they have a new man at the helm, one we're very familiar with. You see him in the center of your picture.
They took a timeout because Henry wanted to take Tim Cahill and Bradley Wright Phillips. It's not that kind of draft here.
Rafa Marquez? No, perhaps not.
Probably not. Probably pass on that one.
It's great to have him back in the league, though, isn't it?
It's fantastic.
Were you surprised?
A little bit, but also knowing that Thierry Henry, and speaking with a good friend of ours here at ESPN, Roberto Martinez, that Thierry Henry really wants to make a go at being a manager, right? In the way the Monaco situation went down, I think there's a chip on that man's shoulder of trying to prove himself. I think this is a great place to do that. I'm intrigued by Montreal, but I'm also intrigued for Thierry Henry because I think he was humbled a little bit with the way the Monaco thing went down. And I, as humble as Thierry Henry can get, I want that chip on the shoulder and that kind of guy to be in this league. But he's going to make Montreal have a little bit more sex appeal than we've ever really talked about in the States. And that's in large part because we don't cover them.
Yeah, and if it's going to be interesting following Tab Ramos's development, Thierry Henry exponentially so, isn't it?
Yeah, especially because Montreal are starting from kind of a weirder place. If you look at this roster, Ignacio Piatti is a left winger. Lassi Lapalainen, who was one of the best young players in MLS last year, is a left winger. They went out and they traded for Ramel Kyoto, who's a left winger. They have Bojan Krkic, who's best position, probably left winger, maybe second striker. Like their roster doesn't make a lot of sense.
No.
So he's going to have to figure some stuff out. It looks like they're taking a timeout to try to do a little bit of that.
I'd be shocked if they don't try to trade. I don't think they're, knowing Henry, and even not even Henry, Montreal. They don't really make a lot out of the draft, right? They use their scouting, but they have had some good picks. I'm not saying they have. They just. When was the last time they made?
They haven't had a pick in the top 10 of the draft since 2015. Number one, Andrew Wenger, all the way back in.
That's where I was going.
2012.
And when was the last time they made the playoffs?
2016.
Right. So this is still, and you can't rely on Piatti. I love Piatti. I put him up as one of the top 10 best players this league's ever signed for how consistent he's been. But if you're relying on those legs and those knees to carry you the way he has, then I think you're going to be left for some disappointment. I think Thierry Henry understands that. I just don't know what they have coming in, and I think that's a big question mark. And here we are, what is it, January 9th? There's still a lot of question marks on Montreal and what that roster is going to look like on opening day.
Reports are, Matt, that they're talking to Minnesota United at the moment. That's what they're doing with their timeout. What do you imagine those two might be talking about?
Well, just looking at Montreal's roster, they don't have a ton of defensive depth. It's their defense that's really let them down the past couple years. Like, maybe you could flip this for Wyatt Omsberg. Wyatt Omsberg hasn't really gotten a chance for Minnesota United, but he's been on loan. He's been a pretty good center back. He checks all the athletic boxes as well. If you could flip this for Wyatt Omsberg and then Minnesota United, if they get up here, just look at what they've done the last two drafts. There's Hassani Dotson and Chase Gasper last year. Those guys, are both in the U.S. national team pool at this point, and then Mason Toye the year before that. So if you're Minnesota United, trade up every freaking year because you're doing better with the draft the last 2 years than anybody.
But the concern I have for Minnesota United, since that's who they're talking to, is this has been a quiet offseason. Hold on here. So you got rid of Quintero, but then you're also going to tell me that that's an addition by subtraction? No, it's not, right? You've got Dotson, who's going to be ultimately the replacement for Ozzie Alonso in that role. But you can't tell me that getting rid of Quintero, now you've added to it. There was a rumor floating around this offseason that Joe Hart would have been the goalkeeper of Minnesota United, but no one called them back. Right, so Minnesota United could have had him for $1 million a year.
I don't know if I would call Joe Hart back these days. I mean, he hasn't been a good keeper
for $1 million a year. You're going to pay another goalkeeper that, right? My whole point is there's been a turnover in the front office between Manny Lagos and Adrian Heath.
Fair,
right?
Yep.
You got to make a decision. Yep. I am a little surprised at how quiet Minnesota United is. On the other hand, I love Adrian Heath with young players. This pick's going to be interesting if Minnesota makes it because of that.
He had to get Joe Hart into the conversation.
Absolutely.
Being the doppelganger.
I was trying to get the doppelganger. By the way, he's lucky to be compared.
Is it asking too much of Thierry Henry and the organization to get the Impact back where they were in 2016? Such an exciting team when you think back to 2016 with Piatti and his pomp and Stade Saputo rocking.
It feels like a different era. It feels like too much in year one because they have so much that's still on the books from these last couple of teams that, frankly, it hasn't quite worked out. Now, I think one of the big tests for Thierry Henry is going to be, can he get something out of Anthony Jackson-Hamel, the homegrown who had 11 goals a couple of years ago but then regressed. Can he work with the forwards to get them more productive? And then it's up to the front office to get some match-winning center backs in there because it's been too long.
I can tell you it is official. The number 9 pick has been traded away by the Montreal Impact to Minnesota United. So Minnesota United are now on the clock in their 4th season now. Made the playoffs for the first time last year.
I liked them last year.
Yeah.
I did. I really did. I thought they were solid. I still think, they got a lot of Ozzie Alonso, credit to him, because I thought he was on his last leg. Dotson's going to be a great pick. We've said that 3 or 4 times.
Yeah.
But I have big concerns up front. Listen, I'm a huge fan of Mason Toye, but if he's going to be your starting 9 consistently week in and week out, that's a big question mark, right? I still think he's got it in him, but right now to compete in the Western Conference, That's where the Quintero, Angelo Rodriguez situation, to me, that's got to be clarified. What are you doing with those roles? Now, obviously, the rumors are saying, well, Adrian Heath loves Dom Dwyer. Can you convince Dom Dwyer to come to Minnesota? I'm not sure that's the right answer either, but they've got a foundation of that team. They made the playoffs. You want to take the next step. I still have question marks what that next step is because I haven't seen it. And that's on Adrian Heath and Manny Lagos to figure that out. Because if they do, then I think you're talking about a team that makes the playoffs for the second straight year and uses Allianz Field, which, by the way, unbelievable stadium, one of the best stadiums in the country that this ever seen, as a real home field advantage, as long as Zlatan and the LA Galaxy don't show up.
Quick recap, Matt, before we get to your thoughts on Minnesota of what we've seen thus far. Garrett McLaughlin, the most recent taken at number 8 by the Houston Dynamo out of SMU. Miguel Berry before him going to Columbus. Henry Kessler, the New England Revolution's pick, and Daryl Dike at the behest of Matt
calling the shots in Orlando now.
Taken by Orlando City. Well, I've been told there's a little spanner in the works, and the trade is now not happening between Minnesota United and Montreal. Obviously, a bit of backwards and forwards. Not quite
they're
sure
watching the show. They're watching the show right now.
Montreal have decided that they want to take the pick back. They do want the number 9 pick now.
You don't find that ironic after the story I just told you about Joe Hart trying to go to Minnesota? Someone pick up the phone.
Someone made an immediate decision.
Look at Henry right now. That says it all. Well, now what do we do? I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I mean, it's back in your court, Thierry, isn't it? What are they mulling over here? Do you think?
Well, it's tough because it doesn't they need defenders, and at this point there aren't any top 10 level center backs left. Maybe they could take someone like a Jack Scahan from North Carolina and turn him into a right back. There are a couple other options out there, but there's not really a clear and obvious pick to borrow a phrase of the time for this team. The one who might be is Dejan Harris, who's a Canadian winger. He's from the Toronto FC system, but he didn't sign, or excuse me, he's from Toronto, not from Toronto FC. Can he play on the right wing? I think he can. If that's the case, then maybe he balances that left side heavy attack a little bit.
Well, we have made you wait. Montreal have made us wait for pick number 9, but it has been announced, and it is Jeremy Kelly from UNC. Right back. What do you know of him, Matt?
I mean, he didn't have the best year this year, but he comes from a program, again, that puts a ton of players into the league. And he's played all over the place. He's been a little bit of box-to-box. He's been a little bit on the wing, and he's been a little bit at fullback as well. So there's a lot of versatility in there. And at this point, it's tough to tell with Montreal because they still have so much work to do on their roster where they see him fitting.
Yeah, and I don't think they were going to do it here.
No.
Right? And you would agree with that. I think the safest pick in 2020 in MLS in this SuperDraft are players that can play in wide areas, more often than not fullbacks. They fill your USL, they fill your roster, and you allow them to grow and see what happens. UNC's program speaks for itself, and I think that's what Montreal did here. But they're going to make the incremental changes and changes necessary to compete in the Eastern Conference. They're not going to make those today in the SuperDraft.
Well, continuing the stream of new coaching stories, new everything in Chicago. The Chicago Fire on the clock. They have pick number 10, Raphael Vicky at the helm. Match, what do you imagine he might be looking at or investigating?
It's tough. Again, it's tough to tell because, like Montreal, they still have so many gaps to fill, and it's a new coach, and you don't know what direction he's going in. Worth remembering, though, Raphael Vicky was the coach for the US U17s. He was a coach in Switzerland at multiple youth levels before getting the full-time job that one year with FC Basel. He's very comfortable working with young players. So expect Chicago to lean in that direction as their overall build. As for players in this draft, again, Dejan Harris is one. Maybe Tanner Beeson.
Yep.
He's a left back, sort of left center back from Stanford. Questions about defenders from Stanford, obviously, but he's a well-regarded player, won a lot, good culture guy.
Can tell you that Chicago have actually traded pick number 10 away to the New York Red Bulls. Yeah, thanks for all the thoughts on who Chicago might have taken. They're not going to. It's now the New York Red Bulls on the clock. We'll come back and talk some more Chicago when they do make a pick. But what of the Red Bulls? Because again, another team in transition.
Yep.
Under Chris Armas. A lot of the big name players have been traded away. The era of Bradley Wright Phillips, Tyler Adams, et cetera, has ended.
Are you looking at me, the Red Bulls probably most hated person on media, or are you looking at the Red Bulls fans sitting to the left of me? I mean, what are the New York Red Bulls going to do? Because quite honestly, it's surprising to me that they're almost just saying, well, you know what? We're going to take a lot of players from New York Red Bulls too and see if they make it. They're doing it in-house. Yep. And I think a lot of Red Bulls fans, rightfully so, are saying, well, wait a minute here. This has been like 3 or 4 straight years where you're losing cornerstone pieces.
Yeah.
And yet the question's being asked, and the answers more often than not, the signs are there, not anyone speaking from the Red Bulls facility or whatnot, is that they're going to do this from their USL team and from their own development program. That begs the question for me whether or not that's going to be successful.
You don't even get to speculate this time, Matt, because the pick is in. I'll just have you react to it and say Patrick Segrist from Marquette, the senior left back, has been selected by the New York Red Bulls. Had a grandfather who played for the Boston Celtics in the 1930s. Just thought I'd throw that in there. Friends with Chris Mueller as well, apparently. Yeah, what do you make of this one?
Well, as soon as I heard the Red Bulls had traded for this pick, I said left back. It was either going to be Beeson or Segrist. I had heard earlier today that Segrist was going to go a little bit higher than he had been projected in the mock drafts. And honestly, if you're a college kid getting drafted by an MLS team, this is the MLS team you want to be drafted for all those reasons you just said, Terry. Because the Red Bulls, they have committed to the idea of not just building with their homegrown players, but getting guys like this, putting him in USL 2, giving him to John Wolynek for a couple of years, and you come out of that an MLS level player.
I want to make this abundantly clear. I love the way the New York Red Bulls foundation is set up.
Yeah.
Absolutely love it. But give me 3 or 4 real high-quality players to that team and to that franchise. Now you're talking about a completely different situation. And that's all I'm saying is that I do love this. And if I'm Patrick, I'm elated at the fact that I'm going to this franchise that develops players. John Wolynek's done a fabulous job with how he's developed those players. But now you've got to bring some cream in there. You've got to get it going. And I think if they added 3 or 4 high-quality players, the Bradley Wright Phillips years ago, boy, now you're talking about a real team.
Have had recent success with Brian White just a couple of years ago. Can this pick be of that sort of caliber?
Yeah, Brian White, Tom Bart, like they don't mind finding diamonds in the rough. It's not going to happen all at once for him, I don't think. You'll see him, in Montclair with, Red Bulls 2 in the USL. But when the Red Bulls trade up to pick a guy like this, it tells you they believe in him. And if you're placing bets, like which one of these guys is going to be in MLS 5 years from now, 100% Segrist. He has that. He got picked by the right team for him.
Now then, we showed you the Montreal pick just a few minutes ago. Thierry Henry, of course, the new man at the helm, and we're delighted to say we have Thierry joining us from Montreal, from the draft room. Thierry, first of all, welcome back to MLS. When you hung up your boots in 2014, did you ever think you'd be coming back in this capacity?
No, first and foremost, hi guys. I didn't think about it, I'll be honest. But when I started to pass my badges, I definitely wanted to start here. I went somewhere else, as you know, but there always have been a plan for me to be able to come and coach in the MLS. So I'm more than happy to be here.
And why Montreal, Thierry? What attracted you to the city, the club, and the project?
Well, first and foremost, the offer was there, right? Because if you don't have an offer, it's very difficult to get a job. So the offer was there. The interest was mutual. It's a great challenge, very difficult one. As you know, the team didn't make the playoffs for 3 years in a row, so that's going to be the aim. Trying to rebuild with the rules of the MLS, as you know, guys, is not an easy one. For the first time for me, I experienced obviously what's been happening today. It's mind-blowing, nice to see. But there is a job to do with the way that we are going to be. Hopefully we can make the playoff, but like I said, it was a mutual desire to work together, and I'm more than happy to be here.
And big picture, Thierry, I know you've kept an eye on the league since you've been gone and doing your television work in Europe and also starting your coaching career. Have you noticed a change and an evolution in just 5 short years? It's a different league, isn't it?
It is a different league. I always talk about it with some friend of mine. But one thing that I will say that now the capacity of the club now and the franchises in this league to be able to attract players and make transfers before, this league, especially trying to get people from abroad, we're trying to get them on the free, and now, they can make, as we saw earlier on at the beginning of the show, some of the transfers that I've seen, it's incredible. Some teams have that luxury, but the league have changed in that way for me. Being able to attract players early and in their prime, it's way better, obviously, for the league.
Thierry, thanks so much for your time. Best of luck in your
Thank
new
you, I
adventure
appreciate it. Thank you.
back here in MLS.
Welcome back.
Have a good one, guys.
Welcome back.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Thanks a lot, Tyler. Bye-bye.
Thierry Henry leading the charge. How do you think he's going to do it? It's going to be one of the fascinating stories of the year.
I mean, obviously the resume, you think of it as a player, but if it wasn't Thierry Henry and we said a coach coming in, he was assistant coach for a team that made the semifinals of the World Cup, and then he flamed out in France, but that's a team where a lot of coaches have flamed out. Everybody would say, that makes a lot of sense for an MLS coach. The fact that it's Thierry Henry on top of that, I let out a visible, fist pump when he was hired, because I'm happy to have him back in the league. He loves the game. He loves running practices, which he did for the Red Bulls for a long while he was playing.
He's got personality.
It's fantastic.
He's got something. Like he's a part of him is a villain, which I absolutely love. We need more of Thierry Henry in this league.
The turtleneck for it, too.
I love the turtleneck, by the way. But that turtleneck isn't going to fit this head. I promise you that one.
You haven't broken yours out again since it made its infamous debut.
If this show continues for another 4 hours, I might have to work.
And it will, the way we're going. The 11th pick is in. I can tell you, a trade from Colorado to Nashville. So Nashville swooping to make their second pick. And it's Alistair Johnson, the right back from Wake Forest, who has been taken by Nashville. So it's the second pick for the new expansion team. And Mike Jacobs, what do you make of it?
Right wing, right back, maybe play a little bit of central midfield as well. I watch Wake Forest for as much as I can. They play the best soccer in the college game. They have real soccer players there, and Johnson was one of them. He stood out for his composure and his reading of the game. The question with him is, can he be athletic enough in MLS?
I can't wait to our good friend Alexi Lawless texts you, what's a real soccer player? But I'll leave that to you two. I just like what Wake Forest does, and this is an interesting opportunity for this young player. When you think of Dax McCarty and Godoy, you can learn in that role from some players that have done it in Major League Soccer. I'm intrigued by Nashville because I've been on the record that I'm a little skeptical about what they're ultimately going to do, like an FC Cincinnati. But then when you dive in and look at maybe a couple moves that they're going to pull out here, I think they're going to be better, and I think they're going to surprise people like myself because that fan base, I was there for the announcement. Wow. Yeah. I mean, that's an event town, and I think this franchise has a real opportunity of resonating in that city, especially when they get their own stadium, the training facility and whatnot. I'm looking forward to it. I just hope for Nashville they start out on a good run and are competitive, because FC Cincinnati, no matter if they were good or bad, they didn't need it because they already resonated in that Nashville's an event town. They better be ready from the opening whistle of 2020.
So the two expansion teams both making 2 picks within the first 11 in this 2020 MLS SuperDraft. Pick number 12 belongs to the San Jose Earthquakes. Matt, interesting year last year for them under Almeida, wasn't it? What are you expecting this time around? What are they going to do right now?
It's tough to say what they're going to do right now because again, the obvious pick would be Dayon Harris because they needed a little bit more oomph on the wing, and he could cover end line to end line, and you need that kind of energy if you're going to play for Matias Almeida. But they need that energy everywhere. The other question I would have is maybe Beeson. He's a local guy. They've probably seen him a million times. Stanford is right up the street from San Jose, and he's versatile. Left back, left wing back, and they need to soak up some minutes because I don't think you can play man-to-man all year long without wilting down the stretch. So they need a little bit of squad rotation.
I love Almeida, what he's brought to Major League Soccer. But I'm curious, what did he learn from 2019, losing 8 of the last 10 games?
Right.
What did he learn? What's the next version of San Jose going to be? But they've also been kind of quiet. I know they've gotten guys that were on loan last year that they've brought in. I understand that. But I love Almeida. It's unique. It's different. It's what this league needs. And I'm very intrigued about San Jose in 2020 because he seems to be someone that is very humble, but also evolves on the go. I'm intrigued at what that Earthquakes team looks like.
Well, I can tell you the pick is in at number 12, and they have stayed very much in their own backyard. It is Tanner Beeson from Stanford University, who's been selected by the San Jose Earthquakes. Won't have too far to go, will he? Even though he grew up in North Carolina, former teammate of Jordan Morris, Brandon Vincent, Corey Baird. He is a centre-back / left-back, Matt.
Yeah.
I don't know where you would slot him into the big picture.
So first 2 years, he was a left-back. The last 2 years, he was a center-back. And the comparison people make is to Matt Besler. You can see he's left-footed, obviously. He reads the game well. He's not super physically imposing. I don't think he is. And here's a question about Stanford defenders. Because we all, look, Stanford wins a ton, but they win by playing banks of 4, deep. It's all blood and thunder, and to send the ball long to those fantastic forwards that they always have. And that, like, Thomas Hilliard-Arce was a more highly rated prospect coming into this league, and he's already out of this league.
Right.
Yeah, I think when you look at Stanford, Jeremy Gunn, by the way, credit to Jeremy Gunn, who's turned around an unbelievable program there at Stanford and being real successful. I think you look at it, you just hit the nail on the head. I mean, Brandon Vincent was another guy, right? So he had all the freedom in the world to go forward, bomb forward, blah, blah, blah. But then questions of him defending weren't really there. You know, when you look at Beeson and Stanford, the way they play, tactically, you just hit the nail on the head. He's been protected at all times with both center midfielders sitting in front of him. As the game gets expansive, especially at San Jose, where you're playing man-to-man, it's going to be interesting to see how he gets there. But one thing's for certain, he's a smart player. And so Almeida's going to say something to him once. He's not going to have to say it to him again, and I think that's going to be an interesting part to Beeson in that career.
New England are on the clock. They've taken a timeout. So just to finish up our thoughts on San Jose.
Yeah, so before, I just want to clarify something. As Minnesota United, want to clarify that their phones are ringing.
Okay.
And 2, that they have spoken with Joe Hart several times the last couple of days. So
you have confirmation.
So the rumors have been squashed, and this is fun times. I hope those in Minnesota are enjoying this.
Why did San Jose crash and burn the way they did at the end of last year, Matt? Because at times they were one of the most exciting teams to watch.
They were like, even as they were crashing and burning, they were exciting.
Yes, that's
because
true.
they played with such energy. The full 90. You can't play for Matias Almeida if you're not 100% committed every time, every moment you're out on the field. But honestly, it looked like a talent issue. They, down the stretch, the final 2 months, they got 0 goals from their wingers. Like, Vaca is a DP. He didn't score. Christian Espinoza, their record signing, he didn't score in the final 2 months. And they lost game after game after game by a single goal. And if you're MLS in 2019, if your only goal scorer is a 36-year-old Chris Wondolowski, you're not making the playoffs. Well, it's 2020 now, and they need to add some quality somewhere else in the attack, and it can't just be through the SuperDraft.
And another little tidbit here, as Chris Armas is actually communicating with Dennis Hamlet, the scouts in the draft room. He's actually in Leipzig in their training camp, following them, learning from Nagelsmann and whatnot. So that's an interesting. So obviously there's been this talking point of Chris Armas and the New York Red Bulls, right? That's an interesting one. And what a phone call that is. Say, hey, coach, where are you? Oh, I'm actually in Leipzig, over there. So that's an interesting tidbit.
We are at pick number 13, if you're keeping count. The New England Revolution were on the clock. They took a timeout. I can tell you they have traded that pick away. And it's Nashville who are back in action. Nashville swooping into what would be their 3rd pick in the top 13. They're staying busy.
We haven't really talked about it, but I do think a question mark that's fair is Gary Smith coached in MLS how long ago? 9 years?
2010, yeah.
Right?
Colorado.
So you look at it, I think there's some question marks, has he evolved at all, right? Because when you talk to players that played for him, and obviously the true sign of great coaches, and I think managers, are, especially in this sport, but even in sports in general, are the ones that evolve and can speak to the modern players. They often say, look at Bob Bradley. I think he's the pinnacle of that in this, where he's done it through generations of players. What's Gary Smith going to do, right? If there's turmoil, if there's struggle, what kind of reaction are you going to get from Gary Smith? That's an interesting talking point for Nashville.
I know you two are a little divided when it comes to the 2 expansion teams. You
divided on everything but his Blazers.
You like what Nashville have done, Matt.
I do. I think it's solid and it's stable. And right now, it does rest on can the 2 DPs, Randall Leal, the young Costa Rican playmaker, and Hani Mukhtar, the German playmaker who's been in Scandinavia for a few years. Do those guys live up to those tags? Because I think their engine room is great with Dax McCarty and Anibal Godoy. I actually like their central defense. They have depth at left back. Are they going to be able to put the ball in the net? They don't have any sure things up there. They have to make at least one big signing, and then I'm really going to be on board with this Nashville team. Not to the extent that they're going to be, 55-point team, but somewhere between.
So are they Minnesota United or Cincinnati?
They're above Minnesota United. They might be Orlando City in 2015 when they had 44, 45 points hung into the playoff race until the last month.
Well, you talked about putting the ball in the back of the net for the expansion team. It's keeping the ball out of the back of the net that Nashville have gone to with pick number 13. Elliot Panico, goalkeeper from UNC Charlotte, will be making the trip up the road to play for Nashville. Matt, have you had a chance to look at him at all?
Yeah, big keeper, good hands. He doesn't, he's kind of a classic keeper in that he doesn't come out. He's not hyper aggressive. He uses his size, he uses his sure hands, he uses his frame. And he's a little bit older as well. He's a 96, so he'll be 24 during this season.
What were you doing in 96?
Oh boy, don't get started, Taylor.
We'll have to escort you off campus
boy.
or what? Okay.
But they only had 2 goalkeepers on the roster, so now they filled that out. They have a little bit of experience. Now they have a little bit of youth as well.
What was Adrian doing in 96 is a better question. He was a radio DJ.
First goalkeeper of the draft taken. I was also watching.
You were good.
The first edition of the New England Revolution.
Yes.
And,
the draft wasn't super then. It was just the draft.
It was just the draft. Dallas are on the clock with what will be pick number 14. Made the playoffs last year, guys, and then lost in that 7-goal thriller to Seattle. Finished 7th, didn't they, in the West? What do you make of their evolution at the moment, post Oscar Pereira?
They need to improve from within. That's they have committed to this identity. They want to be the Ajax of MLS, and that means that the guys who are already Jesus Ferreira, Paxton Pomagol, Brandon Cervania, Reggie Cannon, if he's still there. They need that. And worth remembering, last year, they did the draft and stash thing. They had Callum Montgomery, number 4. They picked him. He didn't play a minute in MLS. He played for North Texas in USL. Whoever they pick here, I think it'll be a center back again. It'll be a draft and stash thing.
I thought Fafa Pico was an interesting pickup.
I think it was a good pickup.
Right, I do too.
Very good pickup.
Right, I think he's arguably one of the best defensive wingers, and I know you agree with that in this league. I think the biggest question mark when I look at Luchi Gonzalez and FC Dallas is scoring goals consistently and being a threat. I'll tell you one thing, though. If they found themselves a 9, this team's different. This team's real
Where are
different.
you on Zdeněk Andrasic?
It's fine, but it's not what Lucci ultimately, he looks at it and says, this is how I want my team to play. But the Cobra has been very effective.
Down the stretch, he was amazing.
And he adds something, especially in this league, when you maybe need to grind out results on the road in hot summer days and whatnot. But the way Luchi Gonzalez wants to play, I think he wants something maybe a little bit more dynamic, for lack of a better word.
Too soon for Ricardo Pepi?
I don't know, and I don't know. My only question is, I would love to see the Hunt family go out and spend a little money and give them a real number 9 or some kind of, because the way they develop young players and the way that academy works, my word, it's been spot on, and they've done it. Imagine if, and I know you could say this for everyone, imagine if you threw Joseph Martinez on there.
Well, their last big hit perhaps in the draft, Tesho Akindele back in 2014. They had Zimmerman and Hollingshead the year before that. The pick is in, and it's Nkosi Burgess from Seattle, who is going to go number 14 to FC Dallas. What can you tell us about him, Matt?
He played at UConn for a few years, and then he transferred to Seattle.
You and our producer, Chris Alexopoulos, are awesome.
It's celebration time.
UConn still is a soccer team. Sorry, Ray Reid, I love you.
Chick in the Matt Doyle.
It's been a rough few years, okay, Taylor. Burgess, he's big. He played as a left center back. He's pretty two-footed. He's going to need some polish, so you'll see him in USL for 2,000 minutes this year, and maybe he becomes the next Aaron Long type player who, gets his feet wet at the lower levels and turns into a guy who could earn minutes in MLS in a couple years.
Any thoughts? Other than the UConn stuff, obviously that is the
he lost me at UConn. No, I like Luchi Gonzalez. Sitting down with him, he's a former teammate of mine. I know, John Champion's another one that was intrigued by FC Dallas and what they did. We did an early game at Atlanta, and they were very good and dangerous in that game. I just think they're like 1 or 2 pieces away of really competing with the LAFCs of the world and the LA Galaxies of the world in the West. But they're not far off because of the way they develop young players. And ultimately, when they sell these players and move them on to Europe, I love seeing that because that is the name of the game. And the Weston McKennies of the world should have been through FC Dallas and sold by FC Dallas. MLS fixes that.
Yep.
My word, now you're talking about really being a player on the world market because you're developing young players.
So 14 picks done and dusted over halfway through the first round. The 15th pick belongs to New York Red Bulls. Remember, they were involved already in an early trade with Chicago. I think they still do own the 15th pick, and I've been told they are taking a timeout.
No, we hit the over on our bet for how many timeouts in the first round, boys.
To mull things over. The Red Bulls took Patrick Segrist, didn't they?
They did.
Pick number 10. Any inklings, any feelings about any sort of direction?
I'll say, like, consensus is the highest rated player left on the board was Cal Jennings, who was a fox in the box type of center forward from UCF, but he's just a Brian White clone. And they already have Brian White, and they already have Tom Barlow. They have Omar Sow at Red Bulls 2, who I think they're going to sign as well. So they don't need center forward depth, which is maybe why they're calling a timeout here. The other thing that would be interesting, I mentioned the name before, Jack Scahan. He was a winger for North Carolina. He projects maybe better as a fullback, a right back in MLS. So maybe he's a guy that they take. Send him to Red Bulls too.
You can say all that you want, but aren't the Red Bulls in Major League Soccer better when there is a Thierry Henry, Tim Cahill, Rafa Marquez? Even if you know what
makes
I'm saying,
our job easier.
Yeah, but my point, Adrian and Matt, is this though. This is New York City.
Yep.
Right? And whether you're in Harrison, New Jersey, I don't care. This is New York. You are the New York Red Bulls, and even this stands for New York City to a certain extent. At some point, you got to have some star power. I'm not talking about the 35, 36, 37-year-old coming back. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that it's almost as if Red Bull Leipzig runs so much of the organization, and I understand that to a point if you're developing Tyler Adams of the world. But Adrian, this is New York.
Yeah.
This is the team. When I started with you, it was Thierry Henry.
Yeah, big
it was Tim Cahill.
Yeah.
Then it was Sasha Kleshin. It was everybody else. There was nothing better than playing the MetroStars and Juan Pablo Angel staring you at the face, or the Djorkaeff, or whatever that is. It's New York. They need a little bit of that.
Yeah, and across the river, Villa and Pirlo as well. Yeah. Both teams in the biggest city seem to be heading in different directions.
Yeah, but NYCFC went out and they broke their record for signing a new player. You know,
well, that's true.
They have,
it's just it's different sort of signing.
Yeah, it's not those big and I don't think it's going to be that for the Red Bulls. I wouldn't be surprised though if Chris Armas came back from Leipzig with a loan in his pocket.
Yeah.
Because RB Leipzig is one of the best teams in Germany. They have guys who are super talented players who are not getting on the field. Maybe find one of those, get them into the lineup for the entire year. We saw them do it down the stretch last year with Josh Sims, who was a decent player. Maybe you could find something a little bit better than decent. Maybe you could find a difference.
Yeah, and I'm not totally sure Lampard and Pirlo was really good for New York City. David Villa was a home run, absolutely.
Yeah.
I still think Thierry Henry was a home run for the New York Red Bulls, right? So I look at this Red Bulls and showing up at Red Bull Arena in 2020. I want a little pizzazz and a little edge to them. And I think Chris Armas is only going to do the most he can do with that. I think Red Bull Leipzig owes them a little bit, whether it's a loan or two. They need something from that scouting network.
Yeah, not getting Tyler Adams back, though.
No, but you got that scouting network. You got to give us something here.
Yeah.
Just to tidy up a pick that happened a little early on. Jeremy Kelly, we thought had been drafted by Montreal. He was, but it was immediately traded to the New York Red Bulls, I'm being told. Some 75,000 of, to Colorado. Colorado Rapids getting in on the act. They take the number 9 pick from Montreal. And the New York Red Bulls are on the clock, and they have made their pick at number 15. And this is he, winger from Louisville, Matt Doyle.
Yeah, Sharif J. He is a typical college winger in that he is very direct. You can see he's a guy who plays on the left, loves to cut in on his right foot, good in the open field, and you will see plenty of him in USL next year, and we'll listen to games called by our good friend David Goss, and check on Mr. J in 2021.
New York Red Bulls staying busy. If you weren't with us at the top of the show,
where were you?
You missed. Yeah, exactly. Where were you? Very different look to the draft this time around in 2020 for the 25th season of MLS. Different sort of feel to the draft, different way we've done it. Hope you're enjoying it. If you weren't with us, you missed a big moment. The number 1 pick, Robbie Robinson. The top collegiate player in the country with the Herman Trophy tucked under his belt after his season in college football. He will be playing with Inter Miami moving forward. Hi, Robbie. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Excellent. Big day for you. Big day indeed. Just give us your initial thoughts on making the move south from Clemson to start your pro career in Miami.
I'm super excited to be a part of this organization, Inter Miami, and yeah, I think it's going to be great, and I'm ready to work really hard for the team, and I can't wait to get started.
Robbie, before you get to Miami, I just want to make sure, did you pay all your parking tickets at Clemson?
Yeah, I think I did, yeah.
In all seriousness, though, Robbie, when you're going into a new organization, a new franchise, what are your expectations with so many, I think, high-quality players coming in 2020?
My expectations are just to go in there and work and just work as hard as I can. And I know coming in as a rookie, there is some stuff that comes with that, and I'm ready to take on any challenge and make my name for myself with this team.
What would you say to Mike Noonan, your college coach, who's played a big part in your development? What message would you give him?
Oh, I give him a massive thank you. He helped me not only on the field, but with stuff off the field as well, taking responsibility for my entire life and really becoming the man that I am today.
Robbie, how happy are you?
I'm ecstatic.
Robbie, smile. You were the number 1 pick in the draft, dude. You're going to Miami.
Okay, here you go. Yeah.
Good luck, man.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Robbie Robinson, the number 1 pick in the MLS draft. Portland have made their pick, meanwhile, at number 16, Aaron Malloy. Matt, over to you. What sort of player is he?
He's an Irish defensive midfielder. He's a little bit older. He's 23 years old. If he had American or Canadian citizenship, I think he would have been a top 5 pick. Considered the best central midfielder, the best ball winner in this draft. And a real leader. Portland, we know that draft picks historically have a tough time breaking through. You will see him, say it with me, in UFL with Timbers 2, and he'll have a chance to push through.
Why do you think that is with Portland and just younger players and whatnot?
It's got to be a club philosophy. I don't know whether it's ground up or top down, but at the same time, they've had one of the better teams in the league. There haven't been a lot of minutes to go around.
Yeah. So when they do hit, they hit big.
Yep.
I mean, Nagby almost fell in their lap in 2011 as an expansion team, but Jeremy Ibobisi, the 4th pick. So every now and then. What do you make of where they are under Giovanni Savarese at the moment? Because last year wasn't quite what many people expected, was it?
No, surprising. I know all of us that have been, whether we've played in Major League Soccer, covered Major League Soccer over the last 15 years, when you have this unbalanced schedule with all the home games in the second part of the year, it usually works in your favor. I was stunned that they only won 8 games at home last year. Absolutely stunned. Now, you had the off-the-field stuff with the fans and the ownership, and quite honestly, I thought Maher Paulson handled that very well. When you look at all of that, I think Giovanni Savarese, I think that was a difficult job. Coming off an MLS Cup appearance, I think it was difficult. However, my biggest concern about this team, they're getting older. And so no matter who you're bringing in Charles' brother, who, by the way, at the most he scored, 5 goals in a season. There's still some question marks about who they're bringing in and whether or not they gel. But I think Giovanni Savarese is extremely happy that it's 2020. 2019 is out the window. It's in the past. And they're going to be intriguing to watch. But Diego Valeri's a year older. Blanco's a year older. And Diego Chara's a year older. And they're relying on those guys again. I think Ibobisi needs a bigger shot than he's been getting.
They do have another Chara, though, joining. Yimmy.
Indeed.
A little chip on their shoulder, perhaps, as well, after the way last year ended. Dallas is back on the clock as we get on to pick number 17. We saw them earlier take Burgess. with pick number 14. There's a little look in at their draft room. What's first order of business at this point, do you think?
I mean, it's not need-based anymore. You really just go for the best player left on your board.
And who is that?
I think it's probably Cal Jennings. Consensus is he is the best talent left. Again, he's a fox-in-the-box type of striker. They do have they have some center forward depth in Andrasic, Pepe, Jesus Ferreira can play there as well. But Jennings is that guy, that's his only position. So he would make some sense for them as a backup third string number 9 who maybe moves up to second string if there's an injury or there's an opportunity.
This is all about finding the best player available. And I go back to what Minnesota United did last year with Gasper and Dotson, because this is where you can see whether or not your front office and your infrastructure has done their due diligence, can find players, and now it's up to you to develop them. And FC Dallas, no matter who they take here, they have a history of developing players and giving them a real opportunity, especially now with the USL franchise. So that's what this is about, because if you're looking for anything more than that, then you're looking in the wrong place.
They had a run, Matt, of dominating the Western Conference 3 or 4 years in a row, where they were either first or second and right in the picture. But that West has changed dramatically, hasn't it? So where does that leave a team like Dallas right now?
I mean, on the fringes last year, and we saw it. They had to hang on for dear life for big chunks of that season, but then once they got into those playoffs, I mean, you boys remember that game against Seattle.
Oh, amazing.
They looked fantastic, and I think that I hope for Dallas' sake they're able to take that performance and spin it forward and say, we were on the field in Seattle against the MLS champs.
And could easily have won.
They could. They could. If Stephen Fry doesn't stand on his head in extra time, they win that game 5-4. So they have to believe in that. They have to lean into that a little bit more. But I'm with Taylor. One more piece. One more big piece.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden you're looking at a completely different situation. I love the foundation of that. We've talked about it. I'm intrigued what Luigi Gonzalez learned from year 1 to year 2 as a young manager and someone that knows FC Dallas and that infrastructure very well. But I still think we're talking about trying to compete with Bob Bradley's team, LA Galaxy, Seattle Sounders, the MLS Cup champions. I think you're a piece away.
I always feel it's a better Western Conference with a strong FC Dallas, who have made their pick at number 17. Cal Jennings, you called it, Matt, best player left on the board.
Yeah, and this is what he does. He puts the ball in the back of the net. He did it consistently for a pretty good program in a pretty good league. He doesn't wow you in any aspect of the game. I think the one I would compare him to the most is Brian White from the Red Bulls. And Brian White makes his living by being in the right place at the right time, being fundamentally sound, and scoring goals.
That's a lot of goals in college football, Taylor. 18, 4 assists, Herman Trophy semi-finalist.
Yeah, because you got to remember, it's 18 goals in how many games? 23 games in a sprint in like 2.5 months, right? So it is a lot of goals. Obviously, the next step, no matter what kind of goal scorer you are, that's always a difficult one, and how quickly you can adapt to that. But again, this is FC Dallas. They have a huge success track record of doing it the right way and giving those young players an opportunity. If you're Cal Jennings and his family, you got to be extremely pleased.
Hope you're enjoying our coverage. Adrian Healy with Taylor Twellman and Matt Doyle, the armchair analyst from MLSsoccer.com, doing it a little differently to kick off season number 25 in MLS. Can you believe we're saying that? Quarter of a century. Quarter of a century. Yeah. You've got me thinking about what we were doing in 1996. And
I was in high school. I was in high school. I'm still cool. Got my driver's license.
Certainly, even the thought of Minnesota United was not a part of many people's thinking pattern in 1996. They are on the clock trying to make their second pick. A recap of what we've seen so far. Patrick Segrist has actually been traded he was picked by the Red Bulls after they traded with Chicago to make that pick.
And that was, just so we clarify, that trade was $100,000 of general allocation.
Yep. And then the most recent picks, we've seen Dallas bolster their roster with 2 players, the Red Bulls selecting again, and the Portland Timbers with Aaron Malloy weighing in. So we are on to pick number 18, back to Minnesota United. You mentioned one of the quieter off seasons all season long. I think Marlon Hairston was the only player they actually brought in any shape or form. Surprised that they didn't go out and make a lot more moves, having finally made the playoffs, cracked the top 4 of the West?
I mean, yeah, I don't know if there's any way yeah, it's kind of shocking, especially because they did that transfer of power where it's Adrian Heath calling the shots now, and I thought that as soon as he had the wheel, he was going to have like 3 or 4 moves lined up. That said, it's still January, early January.
Yeah.
What day is it, Taylor?
No, you're right. You're right. It's early January.
So you don't have to worry that much, but the next couple of weeks, if we're still having this conversation, then you worry.
See, this is where I am on this. Initially, I want to say yes, and that's where I stand still with Minnesota United. However, I will give the benefit of the doubt because the rest of the world, those big signings and good signings, strong signings, are always in the summer. Garth Lagerwey has made a career out of it in Seattle. So if Adrian Heath and Minnesota United are looking at this and saying, hold on, we don't want to go all in now because we want to see what's available in the summer, then I'm actually okay with that. Right? Because then you look at it and say, well, we've given ourselves. My only concern in ever doing that in Major League Soccer is the way the competitions change with expansion teams and more teams coming in. You don't have that leash that, Adrian, you and I have called how many seasons where it hits August 1st, you can turn the corner. You don't have that luxury anymore. But if Minnesota United, and that is their game plan, to wait and see what they need in the summer, then Mason Toye needs to bag, 10, 11 goals, see where they go. And then this becomes a very intriguing franchise for me.
Yeah, they always rather unfairly, don't they, get compared to Atlanta United, who they came into the league with.
Can we end that, by the way?
Perhaps Orlando City is the better comparison for Minnesota United.
Yeah.
Continue the Adrian Heath theme. The pick is in, and it is Noah Billingsley, who goes number 18 to Minnesota United. He'll be playing at Allianz Stadium next season from UCSB. Any brief thoughts on Billingsley? Do you know anything?
Left back, left center back. I think he could play a little bit of both. To me, this strikes me as a very obviously a depth move, and maybe in a couple of years he can challenge Michael Boxall for some time. But we're at the part of the draft now where if you hit on a Hassani Dotson, nobody knows it until July.
Until it happens,
then you figure out what happened.
All right, it's Toronto who are now on the clock for the first time. A peek inside the draft room there. Familiar figures, of course, Ali Curtis involved.
Do you think they're laughing at us? They're laughing at something, guys.
Where are they going to go, Toronto? Haven't brought anyone in this off-season. Lost a few depth pieces in the process.
They're in an interesting position, right? Because they got Michael Bradley off of that DP slot. He's a TAM player now, and they have the open DP slot. I actually don't think they should use it until the summer.
Agreed.
Because this team has plenty of depth, they have plenty of know-how, they have plenty of match winners, even without a third DP.
Yeah.
So I think they should sit on that, relax. You are going to be a top 3 team in the Eastern Conference, and then do that thing where you add that big name summer and you charge down
I agree.
to the
I think they kind of added the piece with Omar Gonzalez last year, right? So that's kind of that piece. They also have a strong academy. Their biggest question mark, and this is going to sound crazy for the season that he had, what is Pozuelo's best position?
Yeah.
Because I think if he can't play in the middle, I think that handcuffs Greg Vanney and this team. And you saw it in Josie Altidore and that health. That's the obvious statement we can make. But Pozuelo had such a good year, but he's in a weird tweener where he doesn't really have his best position, and that is the number one concern, which is why you wait on that DP.
Yep.
You have to wait on that DP till the summer. You weather the storm, so to speak, and I don't mean that because Toronto's going to be cold till June 1st. The truth of the matter is you need to see where you are, and then with the new CBA, depending what those parameters are, then you use that this summer. I like where Toronto sits mainly because Michael Bradley is now a TAM player. But I also think Josie Altidore's health and Pozuelo's position are the 2 biggest question marks for Greg Vanney.
It's been interesting watching them, Matt, post-2017. Obviously, that CONCACAF Champions League run took a long toll, didn't it? It took some 18 months for that to dissipate.
Yeah, it did, but they look a lot different now, and they looked a lot different down the stretch.
Yeah, well, they're going to look even a little more different now because the pick is in. Number 19, Toronto going to Syracuse and getting Niall Higgins. They have some history with Syracuse and Alex Bono, the goalkeeper.
Yeah.
What do you?
You know what's weird? It's amazing to sit here after the season they had last year, and we're 20 picks in. We haven't talked anything about FC Cincinnati.
Yeah.
Who arguably has the biggest question marks and
Well,
whatnot.
they did three super drafts worth of picks last year.
Right. No, I know. But we all know how they work that super draft and what they're going to do this year. Obviously they just announced their new designated player.
Mm-hmm.
They expect to have a second designated player as a number 10 from South America. But I just found it interesting. Here we are. We've been working, for almost an hour and a half, and we haven't even talked about Cincinnati.
No.
So now on to Salt Lake, buddy.
And we still won't because it's RSL on the clock. They were an interesting watch last year after the coaching change with Freddie at the helm.
Yep. That's what you're going to just call it? You're going to label it just as a
Are you ready for
change?
Freddie? I mean, and they stayed with him too. Having sort of flirted with going in another direction. What do you make of RSL?
Well, I mean, as Taylor said, there were a lot of moving pieces with that coaching change, but I like what I saw from Freddie Juarez's team down the stretch. And if you talk to the players on that team, they revere him. It's a little bit like Luchi Gonzalez with the FC Dallas kids. And like if you have that kind of buy-in, and I think I saw it from the veterans as well. Like certainly, Kyle Beckerman, not the player he was, but he was all blood and guts down the stretch. Everton Luis, and like the Nedimo Onwaha as well. Like these guys all bought in. The question I have for RSL is, do they have that high-end match winner? And I think back to we did 22 under 22 a couple of years ago. It was Alphonso Davies, Tyler Adams, Yangel Herrera. These are all starters at Big Five clubs. Diego Rossi, who won it this past, we know he's gonna Big Five leagues and big clubs in Big Five leagues. Diego Rossi's gonna be sold for millions of dollars. The fifth man was Jefferson Savarino. Are you on that same track? He's talented enough. We've all seen it in bursts. If RSL is going to make the next step, I think it's got to be Savarino becoming a best 11 caliber
you
winger.
build the infrastructure in those facilities, and that academy is first class. However, your guess is as good as mine with Real Salt Lake because everything is about their front office and the turmoil and everything in that, and yet they finished, third in the Western Conference?
Beat Portland in the playoffs.
Right, so for me, I look at that coach and say, well, wait a minute. You knew how to right that ship very quickly and get the players to play for you. I still think you got to somehow make a move. Johnson, maybe buy him down, and he's no longer DP, see what you do. But I think if I built that academy and those facilities, I'm selling Savarino so I can send a message to the world market. We're developing players, and we want to move them on.
And a question mark still over Kyle Beckerman and whether they're going to bring him
Free agent,
to. The pick is in, and it's Dayon Harris.
Where'd he go to school, Taylor?
UConn.
University of Connecticut. You can see he's a tiny little winger. He's got very good pace. He's very direct. Can hit the final ball. You see him bending in crosses all the way from the touchline. You don't want too much of that in the professional game. You want to see him get toward the box to the size of those 18s and pullbacks. And that's what Freddie Juarez teaches. Whether he's going to teach it to Dayon Harris at the MLS level this year, I kind of doubt. Jaimison Olave, meet your new player. Jaimison Olave, of course, the coach for Real Monarchs in USL.
Want to move on to the next pick, Taylor, because remember, pick number 21 was already subject to an early trade. DC United and the Philadelphia Union switching places. So DC United now on the clock, and another team for whom we can say a new era beckons. Post Wayne Rooney next year in Audi Field. What do you think of when you think of DC United right now? Ben Olsen still at the helm.
It's an interesting one because I'm intrigued for Ben Olsen and DC United because they now have some flexibility a little bit to deal with that roster. But now I'm going to look at the bigger picture, the macro level. I think this is sooner rather than later that these guys thought. I just look at it. Listen, you open Audi Field, you bring in Wayne Rooney, and then boom, in the blink of an eye, you've now all of a sudden got to find a new identity. You lose Lucha Acosta, who was so dynamic with Wayne Rooney. This is, I think, a little sooner than the DC United ownership wanted to almost try to redo this again, right? And so you look at that aspect. This is an important year, not for just Ben Olsen, but for DC United. Because I think the ownership looked at it and said, Wayne Rooney, he's going to be our picture. He's going to be our face. We're going to get 3.5 years out of it. We're going to build the training facility. We're going to get the USL team going. We're going to potentially add a roof to Audi Field, whatever those additions may be. And now, quickly, there's a new identity already. I like the potential move they're going to make. Obviously, that move hasn't gone through.
Edison Flores.
Because of
he's getting a medical
his physical
today.
and medical. I love the move, quite honestly. Ola Kamara can score goals in this league. But it's an interesting one for that fan base because I think they looked at Wayne Rooney and then now all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, who are we again?
We got to a new era for DC faster than I think anybody thought we were going to be in a new era. Cause it was magical in 2018 down the stretch when Wayne Rooney was there, and it didn't spin forward into anything meaningful at all. So it's back to the drawing board a little bit.
Ben Olsen still at the helm, second longest serving coach after Peter Vermees.
Pressure's on him, though.
Yeah.
And you could tell, and I'm not stating the obvious, just the way they announced whether or not he was coming back, you can tell Ben Olsen has some pressure on him, and I think rightfully so, and I think Ben would even be on the record and say, yeah, absolutely, now is time.
He's become so synonymous, hasn't he, with DC United. His pick is in. DC United taking a goalkeeper from Temple. Matt, know anything about this particular stopper?
I mean, Temple's come up in the world of college soccer over the past few years, and Lefebvre was a big reason for that. He's well regarded. The question with him is, does he command the box well enough? Is he going to come off his line and be dominant enough to be a major professional, a Major League Soccer professional goalkeeper? And with Bill Hamid already there, he's going to have to wait a little while.
The interesting thing about goalies, they can play till they're 40, 41 years old if they do it right? Yeah. So if he takes the opportunity, gets some USL games, it'll be interesting to see.
Best player on the team to go out in the town with, backup goalkeeper.
Actually, doesn't have to worry about any alarm
you never
call.
room with a goalkeeper.
Right.
Ever.
From DC United to New York City FC are on the clock for the first time. Matt, what do you make of...
Matt loves himself some New York City.
They're continuing evolution. I know, didn't you rank them number one team in the East recently? I read of yours?
They are...
Or even in the league.
I think
if you go that far?
They have the most complete roster in the league, right? They were a 65-point team last year. They brought back, I think, their top 13 players. They have their record signing from last year, Matriza, who was lousy in the first half of the year. He was good in the second half of the year. Maxi Morales was an MVP caliber player most years if it wasn't for Vela setting the whole world on fire. Right. So that you can go down the checklist.
More complete than LAFC.
Yeah. Right now, more complete. Because,
it took us this long to really want me to push off you.
I mean, I get it.
You hear me, LAFC, right now.
Yeah.
I think you're intrigued. Listen, dude. I'm not. It's 1A, it's 1B, it's 1-2, whatever it is. I do like the New York City roster. I am 100% with you on all of that. Most complete. That's where we'll beg to differ. Neither here nor there.
It's a weasel word anay. I was trying to get out of saying something meaningful. So
historically, Matt, in the draft, you look back, Kyrie Shelton in 2015 as a expansion team. They got via nefarious means Jack Harrison a year later, and then Jonathan Lewis, who's obviously no longer with them. I know,
but they flipped him for $750,000 in allocation money, and that's fine. Like, what you can sell players within the league as well. As for needs, like they're thin at left back. I don't know that they're going to find a left back that they want here. Maybe Jack Scahan probably is more of a right back. He can maybe play inverted.
Matarrita's still at City Field wondering why he made that tackle.
Oh my goodness. The worst tackle in MLS history.
Oh boy.
New York City FC and playoff defeats are a wonder to behold, aren't they? Fans hoping it's very different this year. And they will be welcoming Jesus Perez to the fold. What do you know of him, Matt?
I know he's in Ireland. I saw a couple of tweets.
There was
apparently he was on trial with Dundalk, but he's you can see here he's a very creative attacking midfielder, has a lot of swag to his game in multiple meanings.
What Matt's getting at, for those of you at home, just Google Jesus Perez Tinder profile.
It's all out there in public, that's for sure.
Personality.
Moving on from New York City FC to Atlanta United. So here we go, season 2 for Frank de Boer. Second in the East, and of course crushing home playoff loss to Toronto. And it's going to be a very different looking Five Stripes heading into year 4.
I saw that in the recent Star Wars that just came out.
God.
Doesn't it look like the Star? Like, what is that?
The draft room is very smart, isn't it, with all the trophies behind them, the ties being worn. Gonzalez Perez, we don't know for sure, but it seems like he's on his way out.
It does. They released a roster update today, and he's still on it, but it really seems like he's going to be sold to Tijuana. There are rumors of that, or reports, I should say, of them signing multiple Paraguayan internationals, guys around 22, 23 years old, a left back and a central midfielder, like a super energetic box-to-box central midfielder, which is, I think, what they need. On paper, it looks like good signings. At this point in the draft, you just look for depth.
This is the real first time, even though Frank DeBoer took over last year, that you're going to see some real turnover. There's potential of having 6 new starters in his 11, right? So you look at that aspect and say, well, is this going to be Frank DeBoer's team? Or is this going to be Bocanegra, Darren Eales' team, right? In that part. The other aspect is I love looking at the evolution of coaches and whether or not they learn from previous seasons. We all know Frank DeBoer struggled early on, but I got to give him a ton of, they did win 2 trophies, right? And they did turn the corner with a heavy schedule. What does CONCACAF Champions League do in 2020 to this team? They denied 3 players to go to the national team camp in January. How serious are they? How confident are they in that competition? This is the real change of Atlanta United, not last year, because now 6 new starters, that becomes more Frank DeBoer's team than Tata Martino.
Were you surprised by the depth of change and a lot of depth pieces lost? Nagbe, Vasquez, Meram, Pogba, Ambrose, Shea, all.
Parker's retired.
Parker's retired.
Yeah, and Gressel's still not done, though I do think they will find a way to get that. It's crazy.
But you bring in Lennon, though. That almost tells you that gives you flexibility.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a flex. It's been strange. It's been a strange offseason.
Well, they hit a home run, didn't they, with their first ever expansion draft pick, 2017, Robinson and Gressel. They are picking number 23 here, and they have gone to Michigan State for a centre-back. Patrick Nielsen is Atlanta United's pick. What sort of centre-back are they getting, man?
He is a pure centre-back. Yeah. He's big, he wins everything in the air, and he's a little more polished. He's a European guy, so he came through a professional academy and then came to a Michigan State team that's put a lot of players into the draft in recent years. The question with him is he going to be able to defend on the half turn? MLS attackers are so much quicker than anything he faces in college, so there's going to be an adjustment period.
And as Matt had said, defence particularly thin with LGP on his way out and Parkhurst having retired.
Yeah.
Can someone like this step into a
you never know. That's the best part about
sports. Miles Robinson a while, didn't it?
It did, but that also was Tata Martino didn't necessarily believe Frank DeBoer did. I just look at that team, and I'm intrigued by him more so this year than I was last year because, they lost Miguel Almirón, but they still had their core group, and Frank couldn't really change a lot after he realized that this year he can.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Now, are they going to be the boring possession team that Frank kind of wants to do? Are they going to be quick, dynamic, and get after it? But CONCACAF Champions League is an interesting competition because that group and that ownership wants to be the first MLS team to ever win it.
A competition that LAFC will also be a big part of in just a little over a month's time, if you can believe that. 72 points last year. 72. Every time I read that number, I'm like, really? They did that? And yet they didn't get it done when it mattered most in the playoffs.
Yeah, that was difficult though. I think to get over the hump against LA Galaxy at home and then have the quick turnaround against Seattle. And listen, I'm on record. That was the best Seattle performance in their history of their franchise. What they did at LAFC. What's that mentality of the group? Bob Bradley's going to have them prepared. But I'm going to actually say exactly what I just did for Atlanta for LAFC. CONCACAF Champions League. John Thornton and this front office, they firmly believe they have a shot to really compete in this competition. 100% that Bob Bradley's going to want to win this. He's going to get after it. But what kind of toll does that take on your team? Because the way the salary cap structure is set up, we saw it with Toronto in CONCACAF Champions League. If LAFC goes all the way to the final, what kind of toll does that take on this team in the latter parts of the year? That's what I'm watching. But because of the way they lost to Seattle, this group is still motivated. I'm very excited to see what LAFC can do. 72 points?
Probably not again.
Yeah. I'm not sure. But then again, who am I to question?
they're not as complete as New York City FC, as Matt has already established. So, so where are they, Finn, at the moment?
They're thin in midfield. Yeah. I think they only have 5 rostered midfielders, and we saw what happened to them last year in that game against Seattle. Latif Blessing went down injured. Mark Anthony Kaye came back from an injury. They weren't able to rotate those guys almost all year long, and on top of that, they lost Lee Win. Now, they have brought in Francisco Janela, who's a very highly rated Uruguay youth international. He looks like Eduard Atuesta's successor. Is Eduard Atuesta?
Well, see, you talk about Rossi and that transfer. I look at Atuesta because all I hear from Mexican clubs and scouts and whatnot, and even South America a little bit, Atuesta's at the top of the list. Another great signing from John Thornton and Bob Bradley.
So you think they may go central midfield?
I do. I actually think. And because Bob is an iconoclast, he loves coaching, and not just like designing the team, but actually making young players better. Whoever gets picked right here has a chance to play. My bet is Brandon Williamson from Duke.
Matt, I can tell you are not correct because it is Paulo Pita from Marshall who's been taken by LA
education.
Yeah, right?
FC.
Bound to get one wrong. Come on, man.
It's a good point. I still can't spell my name right.
Have you seen Pita play?
I have not.
No.
I have not seen Paulo Pita play.
Well, chance to play, perhaps, for Paulo Pita. Moving on to Toronto FC, who are back for the second time with pick number 25. They took Niall Higgins, didn't they, back with pick number 19.
Adrian, what do you make of Toronto? You've been asking us all the questions.
Yeah.
I mean, from afar, what do you make?
I was stunned when they made their late season run. I just didn't see that coming last year. But it still shows you that they have it. They absolutely have it. They have that in their DNA to do that.
They do.
It mattered.
Omar Gonzalez was such a big part of that because if you look before they got him, they were just giving up so many soft goals, and then that would compound. Now, they still did give up soft goals in the second half of the season, but they had that leadership.
In the final, too.
Yeah, but they did have that leadership there so that the draw didn't turn into a loss, and from that they were able to
were also
get
very
momentum.
good in the final.
Yeah,
they were very good in the final. If they had Josie from the opening whistle, it's a different game. And that's not taken away from what Seattle did.
Seattle knows, because if Seattle had stayed healthy in the 2018 playoffs, Seattle, maybe we're talking about them going to 4 straight MLS.
But the first thing Garth Lagerwey said after the game, if Josie was healthy, it's a different. I mean, Toronto was good. I just how they handle Pozuelo and what his best position is going to have a huge say on how successful this team is in 2020.
A new DP spot open, and you think they might not use that until the summer?
I don't think they can right now.
Using DP slots excellently, of course.
They do.
Yes, they do. But I don't think they can right now. One, the CBA discussion is currently going on, right? And two, why would you right now, right? Because I firmly believe when you are going to spend real money, I just feel like the summer gives you more of a window to make I think a more educated decision. I'm not saying those DP signings in this winter are uneducated.
Yeah.
I just think you can do a little bit more due diligence. You have more options in the summer. I would wait if I'm Toronto because I think Ali Curtis, Greg Vanney and that staff, I just think they have enough right now to survive.
I know, Matt, you identified left back as a position, and they don't have any cover for Justin Morrow. Also, possibility of trading Alex Bono?
Yeah, I mean, that is something that has been floated, and Bono, 2 years ago at this time, I think everybody had him pegged as one of the future goalkeepers to maybe challenge Zach Steffen, and then it almost feels like he never really recovered from the CCL run. He made a couple of errors. I think the big one against Tigres. Now, Toronto survived that, but maybe Bono's confidence got shattered. Maybe they need to move him. If that's the case, then I think the highest rated goalkeeper left on the board is Wallace Lapsley from UC Davis. We shall see.
The pick is in. Matt, I can tell you it's Achara, the second Georgetown player taken in the draft from Nigeria, 25 overall.
Yeah.
Do we know anything about
he's a really
his qualities?
Tricky and dynamic 1v1 player. He has been a match winner in some of the biggest games for Georgetown, which just won the College Cup this past year. And congrats to them because they play some of the best soccer in the college game. But Achara's been hampered by injuries. He has never really gotten to show over the course of a season that he can be a high-level guy. And this is when he got to Georgetown, this is winger that people were talking about in like the same breath as a Jack Harrison or a Jonathan Lewis, who would be a top 5 pick.
Trying to think about the teams we haven't talked about in this first round, teams without first round picks. The Galaxy being one of them, FC Cincinnati, you brought them up earlier on. The Chicago Fire. They did have an early pick that they traded away. I think it was pick number 10, wasn't it? But they are now on the clock for their first pick. What do we make of everything that's gone on with the Fire in this last few months?
I mean, it's a complete rebuilding project, right? You're moving back to Soldier Field. You've rebranded in the sense of a new logo and whatnot, which obviously had mixed reviews. But I loved the Chicago Sun-Times today. One, they wrote an article about Chicago Fire. And two, your owner is honest, he's transparent, and he's straight to the point. We need to win. We need to make sure that people want to come to Soldier Field. And by the way, if we need to change the logo, and it is what it is. We move on. That was a true sign of real rebirth, I think. Now, what you do with that, obviously this is a roster that was very old, right? Now, how do you change that? How do you get people to come to Soldier Field when for a good amount of time recently you haven't resonated in Chicago? This is a very intriguing year. Chicago and MLS. That is an important city. It is. That is so obvious to everyone else. But when Chicago's good, it only makes everyone else better. And it's ultimately going to put some pressure on some bigger market teams that need to get their act together a little bit as well. I'm looking forward to seeing what Chicago does. I just don't know if it's going to be overnight. I may be on the outside on that one. I'm just not totally sure it's going to be overnight.
Yeah, with a couple of exceptions, Matt. It's been a decade since Chicago were really a factor in the league.
Yeah, it's been. You have to go all the way back to the Cuauhtemoc Blanco. And
every
Benny
single
Hamlet
playoff year we had, a run we had, it was either we played Chicago and they beat us, or we beat them. And that's what it was.
As you said, that's a decade ago, man. And like the 2010s were kind of a lost decade for this franchise, and it hurt for the Fire fans. I mean, I think they made the playoffs twice. They had that magical year with Mike McGee, and that might have used it all up. But it is a new era. You know, there's new ownership, there's a new front office, there's a new head coach, there's a new chance to win back those fans.
As you can see, the pick is in. Jonathan Jimenez from Pacific University.
Left back.
Left back,
And the only thing to bring this full circle in Chicago, what do they do with the discovery rights to Chicharito? Right? And you hear the rumors over the last 24, 48 hours, LA Galaxy and whatnot, but everything I've been told coming into this year was Chicago has those rights. So how does that play into their factor? Because I'll tell you right now, you signed Chicharito in Chicago.
Can we just get
Soldier Field selling out?
We've been talking about Chicharito since 2014.
It's the same dance we do every January.
So the first round is in the books, guys. We made it through 26 picks. Let's have a little recap for you. Robbie Robinson taken by Inter Miami as the #1 pick. Jack Maher following for Nashville. Then Miami went back to Dylan Nealis of Georgetown. So the expansion teams sharing the first 3 picks. Down to picks 14 through 26, the second half of the first round. And Toronto were pretty active. Dallas making a couple of picks, a lot of depth pieces added. Any way of summing up what we've seen? Did it deviate at all from what you expected, Matt?
No, I think that the top 6 picks were the 6 that I think everybody had pegged. And then at that point, it goes to like, who does anybody, who's #1 on your board? Not to be cliche about it, but the guy to keep an eye on is Robbie Robinson. We all know they spent a lot of money on Julian Carranza to play center forward. But again, Robbie Robinson doesn't think he's not going to compete for that spot. Robbie Robinson's going to go to camp and believe that he can be the starting forward on day one, and that's the mentality you need if you're a striker. We got a lot of choir boys around there. He's not a choir boy.
No, and the true test of a super draft is 2 or 3 years from now, especially the way this league is going. So we don't really know who's going to make an impact. Now, I think Dotson and Gasper of last year was a little bit of an anomaly, but the truth of the matter is, I don't know about you guys, it's January 9th. I'm ready for this season to go now. So you get this little tease of this with 2 new franchises coming in, and yet we've got to wait wait a little bit longer. The CBA is still at the forefront of my mind and the forefront of everyone else's mind, and it's been a little quiet on that front. I think that's a positive sign, but that's the most important thing that everyone's talking about. So then preseason can start on time, and everyone can get going with CONCACAF Champions League in early February.
It is one of the earliest starts to an MLS season. February 29th is when it kicks off. Our beginning here on ESPN will be a really tasty doubleheader for you on March the 1st. The champions as well will start. Seattle Sounders taking on that new-look Chicago Fire. And then talking of new, how about Inter Miami's first game, a trip to LAFC, March the 1st, 3 and 5:30 Eastern start times on ESPN.
I'm just actually texting my mom what she's having for lunch.
The draft is not done, by the way. Round 2 rolls on. You can see all of it over on MLS Soccer.com. Matt, somehow you're going to jump straight onto that coverage.
We'll see. We'll see. Maybe a refreshment before that.
Yes, the 2020 SuperDraft presented by Adidas. See round 2 on MLSsoccer.com. To Taylor and Matt, thanks so much indeed, gentlemen. From me, Adrian Healy. Goodbye for now.